It's typically a night for childhood fun and adventure.
It was about 2011. I was just going to take my kids out trick-or-treating.
A time for candy and costumes.
Masks and capes and that kind of stuff.
But that Halloween, for one California community, not all the monsters were make-believe.
She had 10 stab wounds. It was excessively violent.
It was obviously a brutal crime. It was just vicious.
The victim is a beloved mother of 4.
My mom loved doing things for other people and helping people.
She was one of the sweetest ladies that you could talk to.
The brutal murder sends shockwaves through the community.
They lived in a good neighborhood, in a quiet neighborhood, but here you have a dead woman on Halloween night.
And the terror intensifies as the investigation leads down a chilling path.
We found masks like Jason would wear in the Friday the 13th movies.
He did believe he was either possessed with or seeing demons.
And before it's all over, one family will be forced to confront the evil in their midst.
I never in a million years expected that he would suddenly go from dependent and manipulative to suddenly violent.
Manteca, California, October 31st, 2011. It's Halloween in this town of 75,000, over an hour east of San Francisco Bay.
Manteca is a little bit more than a suburb. It's actually become a suburb of the Bay Area, which is crazy.
And as darkness begins to fall that evening, parents rush home from work to ready the candy and costumes. Parents like Detective Wayne Miller with the Manteca Police.
I just got home from working my regular shift and just going to take my kids out trick-or-treating.
But what the community of Manteca doesn't know as they head out that night for a little lighthearted fun with the kids is that this Halloween, the terror will be real. And so will the blood and gore. It's just before 6 o'clock that evening when Caitlin McGehee tries to wake her mother, Kathleen.
Caitlin knocks on her mother's bedroom door, which is shut. Her mother doesn't answer.
The fact that her 55-year-old mother doesn't respond worries Caitlin.
Mom is on the edge of diabetes. She might have some insulin issues. Maybe the diet she's on has backfired and she might have fainted.
Mom!
And her fear intensifies as she tries the door again.
She knocked louder and called her mom. There was no response. And she tried the door knob and found that it was locked.
That's when Caitlin starts to panic.
Her mom doesn't usually lock the door when she's taking a nap. So by this time, she's kind of pounding on the door and no response.
She does go around to the outside of the house to try to look into the window. She's not able to see. The blinds are drawn.
Unsure what to do, Caitlin calls her older brother, Justin.
And I said, Caitlin, I'm on my way. Hang up the phone and call the police right now.
911. Hi, my mother has been in her room with the door locked. She's not responding when I knock on the door, and she's diabetic and prone to sleep apnea. I'm just worried something's wrong with her. Okay.
Ambulance company and fire department both responded. There, they were able to remove the lock from the door.
And moments later, as he's racing to the scene, Justin McGehee gets a second call from his sister.
She was sobbing so hard I couldn't understand what she was saying, but eventually it became clear that she was saying, she's dead.
Not only is Justin and Caitlin's mother dead, what greets the first responders beyond her locked door is a scene straight out of a slasher movie.
They found Kathleen McGehee in the bedroom, lying on her back with multiple stab wounds to her torso and neck.
Based on the amount of blood that is around the body, this was definitely a crime scene.
But who would want to murder a beloved mother of 4?
She was one of the sweetest ladies that you could talk to.
And even more mysteriously, did the date have something to do with her death?
Here you have a dead woman on Halloween night. It was eerie.
Like a lot of upper-middle-class families in suburban Manteca, the McGees had moved in from elsewhere.
They were from the Bay Area, and they had, I think, been here about 10 years.
Kathleen and her husband, Tom, had met when they were in college.
Mom and Dad were going to 2 different universities or colleges at the time, and they were each involved in sort of a Christian fellowship ministry.
Although for Kathleen and Tom, fellowship turned into something more.
It didn't take them very long to decide that we're supposed to be together.
The couple got married and moved to Chicago soon after.
My dad went to Moody Bible Institute. He learned Greek. It's nice to be able to read the old manuscripts yourself. So I was born while they were over there.
A second son followed, and to support their growing family, Tom put his dreams of the ministry on hold.
They moved back to California, and we're here ever since.
Back in California, Tom put his knack for languages to work.
The father is an international businessman.
Tom worked a lot out of the country.
He was gone the majority of the time, months at a time, and then would come home for a period of time and be gone on another trip.
Meanwhile, Kathleen was a stay-at-home mom. Once in California, the couple had 2 more children. Third son Dawson, born in 1985, and daughter Caitlin, the youngest.
Mom loved being pregnant. She loved having babies. She loved having kids. She was a very nurturing person.
And she devoted all of her time to raising the kids.
When we became old enough for school, they decided to homeschool us. My mom continued to be a stay-at-home mom, but she was also, if you will, a teacher of 4 different grades.
Kathleen excelled at it too, if her bright and talented children were any indication.
They were all very intelligent. They were musicians. All of them played some sort of instrument, if not many instruments.
And in the mid-90s, Kathleen and Tom moved the family to Manteca.
They wanted to own a home. They couldn't afford that in the Bay Area.
Over the next decade, the kids all grew up and left for college.
Once my mom didn't have a bunch of kids running around the house to take care of, I kind of wondered what she was going to get involved with.
For Kathleen, that wound up being a return to her religious roots.
She and my dad started attending the church that my wife and I go to in Stockton, which is it's an evangelical covenant church.
I got to know Katie as a member of the church. She was quiet, but she was passionate when you were able to sit and talk with her about things that really pulled at her heart.
At the church, Kathleen became an avid volunteer.
My mom loved doing things for other people and helping people.
And she soon found her calling.
She became a part of our Advocates for Victims of Abuse program that we have. What that group does is it ministers to women from, it could be sexual violence, and it could be home or spousal abuse.
She was good at it too.
She would say, "This is for me to do," and then she would learn aggressively, almost obsessively about it because it wasn't okay to go halfway.
She would at times ask me to pray for her as she was reaching out to women or children involved in abuse.
But on Halloween of 2011, it would be Kathleen's children who needed prayers, and she would be the victim. That October, Kathleen's husband, Tom, is away as usual.
Tom was, I believe, in Japan or China on a business trip.
But despite that, the house is more crowded than it's been in years.
Caitlin was actually home. She was preparing to get married and preparing to move.
Caitlin's older brother, Dawson, is also living at home, at least for the time being.
He graduated from University of the Pacific. He was a music major and was very talented musically, and he was teaching music to elementary school students.
And Kathleen still has her volunteer commitments to keep up with, which has her scrambling in the kitchen on Sunday afternoon, October 30th.
She was making jambalaya for the domestic violence class the next day. They're having a potluck.
But at a little before 5, the pot is off the stove and in the refrigerator, ready for the next day. And Kathleen quickly cleans up the kitchen because she has one last chore to do before the day is done: pick up her daughter, Caitlin, who'd spent the weekend at a Christian ministry retreat.
She left on a Friday and was coming back on a Sunday evening.
So after washing the dishes and wiping down the counter, Kathleen dashes back to her bedroom to grab the keys off her dresser.
She was planning on picking Caitlin up at 6 o'clock.
But as she turns to leave, Kathleen freezes in terror. Because looming in the doorway, blocking her only escape, is a knife-wielding killer in a Halloween mask. Coming up, the horrific murder strikes terror in the community.
She had a constellation of stab wounds consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill.
But why had the mother of four been so brutally attacked?
The house is neat, orderly. There was no signs of any forced entry to the house.
At dusk on Halloween 2011, the streets of Manteca, California were alive with groups of children eagerly going door to door. But in one Manteca neighborhood, the trick-or-treaters were stopped in their tracks when police sirens descended on the suburban home of Tom and Kathleen McGehee. Minutes earlier, firefighters and EMTs had responded to a 911 call from the couple's daughter, Caitlin.
The call was just that they were concerned about mom. She wasn't responding at the door and she had some health concerns.
But when the first responders broke down Kathleen's locked bedroom door, they stepped into a scene straight out of a horror movie. The 55-year-old mother of four lay sprawled on the floor, dead.
There had been multiple stab wounds to the upper torso.
At the precise moment that thousands of children were out roaming the streets, the Manteca police had a murder on their hands.
There's not too many things that surprise you after you've been doing the job for a while, but every once in a while something like this comes along.
Across town, Detective Wayne Miller and his children were heading out the door for a night of trick-or-treating.
I get a call from dispatch advising me of a homicide.
And when he arrived at the scene, Detective Miller immediately realized that Halloween wasn't the only thing that made this murder unusual.
The house was in a upper-middle-class neighborhood, not a place that we typically would expect this kind of a call.
The nature of the crime stood out too.
This was a very violent death.
She had sustained multiple stab wounds, a constellation of stab wounds that would be consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill.
It appeared that the killer had surprised Kathleen as she was on her way out.
At the time that we found her, her car keys were next to her hand.
The blunt force trauma indicated that she was beaten up, knocked down, while she was fighting to the best of her ability.
And once she fell, her attacker had been relentless, enraged even.
He did not stab her just once. He stayed with her and stabbed her multiple times. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. 10 times.
But who would commit such a horrible crime?
I'd never considered that Katie would have someone who would wish her ill will.
It didn't appear to be a burglary gone wrong.
The house is neat, orderly. There was no signs of any forced entry to the house, valuables throughout the house that hadn't been disturbed.
In fact, other than Kathleen's dead body, the killer had left no trace behind.
We never found a bloody knife anywhere. So we believe it was a kitchen knife.
The wounds tell us that the knife was a single-edged knife.
But who had wielded it? Hoping for some answers, or at least a better sense of the timeline leading up to the murder, the investigators turned to Kathleen's daughter.
I brought Caitlin McGehee back to the police department to interview her.
At the police station, Caitlin told Detective Miller that she'd been living at home for the past few weeks.
My sister was getting married soon, and she had come into town to stay with my parents, do some shopping, find a wedding dress, plan things out.
Although, according to Caitlin, she was away when her mother was killed.
She's been gone for the weekend to a Christian retreat. She left on Friday and was supposed to be coming back on Sunday, and she made arrangements with her mom to pick her up on Sunday when she got back.
Caitlin had called the home phone and left a message for her mom saying, hey, pick me up at 6 o'clock.
But at 6, when Caitlin got back from the retreat, her mother wasn't waiting.
When Caitlin tried to call Kathleen didn't answer the house phone. She didn't answer her cell phone.
However, after trying to reach Kathleen several times, Caitlin finally did get a call back. Only it wasn't her mother. It was Caitlin's older brother, Dawson.
Dawson called and said, "Oh yeah, I remember Mom said something about you needing to get picked up, and why don't I just pick you up because I got some errands to run anyway."
Glad she wasn't left stranded, Caitlin accompanied her brother on his errands, and then the pair stopped off for dinner.
They didn't arrive back home until almost 11 o'clock at night.
By then, her mother had gone to bed. At least, that's what Caitlin's brother said.
Dawson told her that their mom was not feeling well.
At the time, Caitlin hadn't thought much of it.
She simply just goes and goes to bed herself in her bedroom.
The next morning, when her mother didn't stir, Caitlin figured that her mother was still sleeping in, something her brother later confirmed.
At 6:30, he sends her a text saying, "Hey, I talked to Mom earlier this morning. She's not feeling well. She's going to sleep the rest of the afternoon."
According to Caitlin, she and Dawson had spent the morning out.
Dawson said that Kathleen had asked Dawson to drive Caitlin to do some errands such as closing her bank account.
Then, she'd met a friend for lunch.
When she got home, she didn't see Dawson, and then she went to go check on her mom.
Caitlin had called 911, and then her brother, Justin, who'd rushed right over.
When I got there and I saw police lights and ambulance lines flashing.
Caitlin had also tried calling Dawson.
She was actually outside with law enforcement trying to call him to let him know. And Dawson was not answering his phone. Caitlin was not able to get in touch with him.
Did that mean he wasn't aware of the horror that awaited behind his mother's locked door?
Where was he at when this apparently happened? We knew that she had been deceased for at least a few hours. Rigor mortis has set in.
Or had she been dead even longer? Kathleen's phone records indicated that her last call had been made on Sunday afternoon to Dawson's older brother, Colin, while she was working in the kitchen.
She talked to her son on the phone right around 4 o'clock. So we know that she's alive and well at 4 o'clock. We know she's not answering her phone at 5 o'clock. And no one other than Dawson can say that they saw her or spoke to her after that time.
And that left the investigators convinced that Dawson was the key to solving his mother's mysterious murder.
And so the focus did become, where is Dawson? Why is he not answering? Why can we not get a hold of him?
Coming up, the investigators make a chilling discovery in Dawson's bedroom.
There was a journal that was discovered that gave a lot of insight into his mind.
And the portrait of a troubled young man emerges.
Some switch went off inside of his head.
On Halloween night 2011, the police in Manteca, California, had a nightmare on their hands. On the one night a year that saw thousands of children going door to door, a murder suspect was roaming the streets. At around 6 that evening, just as kids were donning costumes and homeowners were busy prepping the candy, firefighters and EMTs responding to a welfare check had found 55-year-old Kathleen McGehee murdered in her bedroom.
They found Kathleen and noticed the stab wounds and called for police response.
And now, just hours after finding Kathleen dead, the investigators believed that Kathleen's son, 26-year-old Dawson McGehee, held crucial information that could crack the case.
The only other person who lived at the house was Dawson, and Kathleen had been home alone with Dawson all weekend.
But did the fact that he was apparently the last person to see her alive mean that Dawson had something to do with his mother's death? Dawson McGehee was born in 1985.
In the sibling lineup, Dawson was third born. So I had me, then my brother Colin, then him, and then my sister Caitlin.
Although compared to his siblings, he'd been a handful.
He always required so much more attention than the other children.
And it didn't matter if the attention was positive or negative.
He would get into all these little ways of trying to get someone to react. He would try to get a rise out of me, try to get a rise out of our other brother, out of my sister. You know, he would do little things until she cried.
And according to Justin, Dawson was eventually diagnosed with ADHD.
He needed more time being guided through his homework or his daily work. Mom really wrestled with whether to have him on. I think almost all they had at the time was Ritalin.
But instead of medication, Dawson found music.
Dawson really could connect with that emotionally. There's a lot in that you almost can't put into words, and so he would just spend hours practicing.
The focus seemed to help. Dawson finished high school and went on to college, graduating in 2009 with a music degree.
He graduated from University of the Pacific here in Stockton, and with over a 3.0 GPA.
Although he graduated, he never really got off the ground. He never really got that job and moved out of the home and began to live an adult life.
He briefly taught music part-time at a local elementary school, but the job didn't last.
It was difficult for young adults coming out of college to obtain employment in their field.
However, that wasn't the only or even the biggest issue that Dawson faced. There was something else, too, something that set him apart from the typical underemployed millennial.
Some switch went off inside of his head, and he did believe he was either possessed with or seeing demons.
Worried for her son, Kathleen had sought help.
His mother had been taking him to various psychologists and psychiatrists in the area.
A lot of her attention was spent towards just trying to figure out what was going on with him.
Despite the therapy, Dawson's situation continued to deteriorate.
He became more and more withdrawn and wasn't working. He also started using marijuana a lot. People, that are starting to suffer from mental illness will self-medicate.
However, Dawson's self-medication had only made things worse.
When he smoked pot, it enhanced his visions or his thoughts of the religious angels and demons scenarios.
And as his dreams and visions grew more frequent and vivid, Dawson developed a fascination with horror and slasher films. The gorier, the better. The fascination soon became an obsession, to the point that he began collecting props, costumes, and masks from his favorite films.
We found in his bedroom multiple masks, like hockey-style masks like Jason would wear in the Friday the 13th movies, coveralls like Michael Myers wore in the Halloween movies.
He'd wear them around the house, the masks and capes and that kind of stuff.
He would even wear them in public.
He would wear them while he was driving sometimes. He said that they calmed him.
He really liked Halloween, and he wanted to go see it at the movie theater. And one of his brothers had taken him, and he had brought with him the Jason mask, and he was actually wearing the mask.
And such bizarre public behavior wasn't the only evidence of Dawson's deteriorating mental state.
There was a journal that was discovered that gave a lot of insight into his mind and the way he was thinking.
There were some very unusual religious sort of connotations, phrases, just statements by him that had religious undertones.
His whole family is very religious, but he became obsessed with religion and felt like he was seeing Jesus.
It's hard to say if this religious infatuation had been manifesting for a long period of time or shortly before the murder happened. But he seemed to be really obsessed with that.
Or was it possible, Dawson's siblings began to wonder, that his obsession with angels, demons, and horror films was just Dawson's latest attempt to grab attention?
He seems to be using this to carve out a life for himself where he just gets to be the pathetic, pitiful, unstable, unhealthy, whatever person that'll just be loved and nurtured and taken care of. It's almost like he had this idea that the right kind of relationship to have is one in which you don't have to do anything and everybody does stuff for you.
Kathleen certainly did everything she could to make Dawson happy.
Dawson was very dependent on his mom, wanted his mom, I think, to rescue him or always needed attention from his mom.
She was doing his laundry. He didn't cook the food. He would leave messes around the house for my mom or both my parents to clean up. He wasn't pulling his weight at all, even in little ways.
But did that mean Dawson was deliberately taking advantage of his mother? Whenever her children suggested it, Kathleen became defensive.
It didn't feel as much like she received it as us being a team with her and trying to do what was best for him, but as though we were all against him and against what she was doing, and so therefore against her too.
She was really his one and only ally. There was a rift between, I think, the rest of the family and Katie. And I know that the husband, Tom, was very frustrated with Katie's constant excuses for Dawson.
Although as time went on, others shared the rest of the family's frustration, including Kathleen's pastor.
I think Dawson took advantage of Katie's compassionate and empathetic heart and played to being wounded so that Katie would go out of her way to help him.
And thanks to her involvement in the church, especially her volunteer work as an advocate for victims of domestic violence, Kathleen slowly came around too.
In the course of those classes, teaches you to recognize signs of somebody that might be codependent or enabling.
She was starting to realize how she was being manipulated by Dawson.
As a result, Kathleen's relationship with Dawson had started to change.
She was standing up to Dawson more, starting to question some of Dawson's behaviors.
And over the course of 2011, she had begun distancing herself from Dawson, making a conscious effort not to cater to his every need.
Her attention was on other things and wasn't just on Dawson.
Not just her volunteer work either. There was also Caitlin's upcoming wedding.
Kathleen has been spending a lot of time with her, planning this wedding.
Kathleen's new priorities didn't sit well with Dawson.
He may have felt some sort of abandonment from her.
His mom was always his ally. His mom was the one that was going to help him, and there always had to be attention from mom.
But had Dawson's sense of abandonment festered into a murderous rage?
When Mom began to say, no, we can't do all the things you want to do all the time, somehow he just could not deal with that. He felt like the world was coming unhinged, and he certainly was.
That's what the evidence and family history appeared to suggest. Even if Dawson's brother had a hard time bringing himself to believe it.
I can't think of a single time when I saw or knew of him physically hurting someone. Would stir up conflict, but never get physical. I was never afraid of my own kids being around him. Never in a million years expected that he would suddenly go from being dependent and manipulative to suddenly violent.
And not just violent. What Dawson had allegedly done bordered on the unthinkable.
It's a son accused of a very horrific crime against his own mother.
And now, on Halloween night, the disturbed and potentially deadly young man was somewhere out there. And thousands of vulnerable children were out on the streets, happily trick-or-treating and totally unaware that a murderer in a mask might be among them. Coming up, with a madman on the loose, the police launch a desperate manhunt.
13 years as a police officer, I can't recall ever working an investigation like that.
And with the streets packed with children, the stakes couldn't be higher.
Both hands up in the air!
In Manteca, California, Halloween night 2011 had all the makings of a horror movie. That evening, just as trick-or-treating was about to start, firefighters and EMTs responding to a welfare check had found Kathleen McGehee, a 55-year-old mother of 4, murdered in her own home.
She was very clearly, deliberately killed by somebody. It's very obvious. There's no way this was an accident.
And Kathleen's son, Justin, was convinced that his deeply troubled brother, 26-year-old Dawson McGehee, had something to do with their mother's murder.
It's gotta be Dawson. I don't know that, but I can't see how this could have happened any other way.
And if Justin was right, that meant his brother could be out prowling Manteca's streets, which were packed with hundreds of potential victims.
No one knew where he was at the time. I put out a BOL, be on the lookout, to our officers.
And at a little after midnight, a patrol officer finally spotted Dawson's car and started tailing it.
He was waiting for additional units to effect a traffic stop.
Units raced to the scene from all across town.
I got there just before they stopped the vehicle. We conducted what's called a high-risk vehicle stop.
Dawson! Stick your hands out the window, both hands up in the air.
He followed all the instructions. He didn't ask any questions.
Hands up! Face the front of the car. Stop!
He just did what he was instructed to do, and was handcuffed and placed in a patrol vehicle.
With Dawson in custody, the tense search was finally over.
Being on Halloween, it was just very bizarre, like a movie.
And things got even stranger when the investigators brought Dawson in for questioning.
He would suddenly start fidgeting and having some jerking body movements and doing weird things with his hands.
Almost like he had Parkinson's disease.
Despite the shaking, Dawson did manage to deny having anything to do with his mother's death.
I want to talk to you about what happened to your mom.
What happened to my mom?
Well, you tell me.
People called me and said something happened at home to Mom. They were very bad.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to my mom?
He just said that he got some phone messages from his brother that something happened to Mom and he needed to come home.
That's what Dawson claimed. But the investigators soon noticed something that contradicted his denials.
When I had the patrol officer bring him back to the police department, I had him collect the clothing that he was wearing and a black leather jacket. There were some stains on that black leather jacket that appeared that they may be blood. And when I started asking more questions, he asked if he should have a lawyer.
You're supposed to have an attorney. Come ask me. I would offer that. I want to ask for an attorney.
You want to ask for an attorney?
Yeah.
At that point, I have to respect his rights, and I stopped with any questioning.
Between the apparent bloodstain, what he'd told his sister about their mother sleeping in, and the fact that he'd been home alone with Kathleen at roughly the time she had been killed, the police placed Dawson under arrest for murder. And by the time he stood trial for murder on November 6, 2012, the evidence against Dawson looked even stronger.
The clothing items were sent to the Department of Justice for analysis, and it was determined that there was blood on the sleeve of his black leather jacket, and it matched up to belong to his mother.
And according to the prosecutor's opening statement, that could only mean one thing, that Dawson was guilty of murder.
There was no reasonable explanation for his mother's blood to be on his jacket.
Then, after laying out the forensic evidence that implicated Dawson for the murder, the prosecutor detailed how he'd killed his mother with cold and calculated precision.
Caitlin was going to be out of town. He knew it was going to be Halloween. He knew his father was out of town. In my mind, I believe that he planned it. That he wanted to provoke a fight, that he wanted to do this, that he had planned it for some time.
13 years as a police officer, I can't recall ever working an investigation where an adult son came in and brutally murdered their mother.
However, as damning as the blood and Dawson's infatuation with violent horror movies were, would they be enough to secure a conviction?
We entered the plea of not guilty by reason of insanity.
The legal insanity in California is that you either don't understand the nature and consequences of your actions, or you don't know what you're doing is wrong.
The prosecutors were confident they could prove Dawson had known what he was doing.
lying about his mother, saying, oh, I'm not feeling good, I'm going to sleep the rest of the day. Those are clearly signs of consciousness of guilt.
But first, the jury would have to decide whether he had actually killed his mother.
Mental deficiency or illness doesn't come in to the guilt phase.
And if found guilty, then he would go into a second trial to determine whether he was sane or insane at the time.
During the guilt phase, the defense did its best to attack the prosecution's case.
They didn't have the murder weapon. They didn't have anything like that. They didn't have a confession, anything along those lines.
Still, the prosecutors had no doubt that the jurors would determine that Dawson was his mother's killer.
There was no other reasonable interpretation that we could make of the evidence and his conduct.
But despite the prosecutor's confidence, when it was the jury's turn to interpret the evidence, they struggled with the decision.
They took days and days to deliberate that. Days and days.
Miss Adams had been pushing for a first-degree homicide, and I thought maybe one or two jurors would find that they didn't have enough evidence.
But if there were one or two holdouts hesitant to find for first-degree murder, could they make a difference? On November 29th, after a week of deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict.
They found him guilty of second-degree murder.
I had hoped for first degree, but it's still more understandable for someone to do something in a rage than someone planning this all out. And there's a charitable benefit of the doubt in that.
I think it's too difficult for a jury of 12 people to think that a family member would really take the time to plan and deliberate and premeditate to do this type of a gruesome of killing.
The jury's work wasn't done, however.
After they found him guilty, we start the insanity phase.
Found not guilty by reason of insanity, he would be sent to a state hospital rather than a prison.
And if the jury decided to send Dawson to prison, he could be there for a very long time.
15 years to life is what the sentence is for a second-degree murder.
But which way would the jury rule? At trial, Dawson exhibited none of the bizarre symptoms that had been on display during his interrogation.
He had dropped the twitching and movements, and he basically just sat there stone-faced throughout the trial.
Even during the autopsy photos and the photos of the crime scene, he was very emotionless.
But did Dawson's detached behavior argue for or against his sanity? Opinions differed, even among the experts.
We put the doctors on that actually interviewed him. I had two doctors that both determined he was sane, and the defense had one court-appointed doctor who indicated that he was insane at the time, and then they hired a doctor that came back and said he was insane.
Those four doctors weren't the only ones who testified, though. There was also a fifth doctor, one whose opinion could very well decide whether Dawson went to prison or a psychiatric hospital.
I was appointed not for the prosecution or for the defense, but to do an impartial evaluation for the court. They needed another opinion to essentially break the tie.
Coming up, the doctor testifies about his examination of Dawson.
He was hearing voices that morning.
But will his testimony end the debate over Dawson's sanity?
The jury took a matter of minutes.
By December of 2012, Dawson McGehee had already been convicted of murdering his mother on the day before Halloween 2011. But now it was up to the jury to decide whether the 27-year-old would be sentenced to prison or a state psychiatric hospital.
Dawson's defense was an insanity defense. The argument was that he was not capable of knowing or understanding the nature of the act.
The police and prosecutors had argued strenuously against the insanity defense.
We felt that even if he did have some sort of mental issues, he still knew that what he did was wrong.
And Dawson's family went even further than that.
He was faking it. He had a lot of time to build up this whole I'm mentally unstable, oh, I killed my mom because I'm crazy thing.
Dawson's own father described his son as a predator. He described him as someone who lied a lot, someone who was manipulative.
The expert opinion was divided, though. During the insanity phase, 2 psychiatrists had testified that Dawson was sane, while 2 others testified that he wasn't, which meant that the entire outcome could be riding on the testimony of Dr. Philip Trompeter, the 5th doctor who examined Dawson.
During my interview with Mr. McGehee, he was essentially focusing a great deal on all of these symptoms that he said he had, including hearing voices that morning. He expressed a number of peculiar ideas, which is sometimes seen with mentally ill people.
There was one catch, however.
Most often, mentally ill people don't parade their symptoms in front of you.
And that led Dr. Trompeter to an inescapable conclusion.
In my opinion, he was faking.
But would the jury agree with the doctor's diagnosis?
The jury took a matter of minutes to find him sane.
Dawson McGehee would be going to prison.
He was sentenced to 16 years to life.
15 years to life is what the sentence is for second-degree murder, and then he was given an enhancement based on the use of the knife.
However, while Dawson was found to be sane and sent to prison, one question remains. How did Halloween factor into his mother's murder? Was it the trigger?
It was obvious that he used Halloween as his launching pad, as his moment to seize and act out on some of the fantasies that were going on inside of his head.
Or, as his brother believes, was it part of Dawson's plan to both murder his mother and hopefully get away with it?
I thought it was calculated. You hear about killing your mother, people think, oh, well, there must be something wrong with him. And then they're more likely to go, oh, no one would do that.
Without a confession,
I dropped the gun. Why didn't you just say gun?
someone will get away with murder.
Look at me. I ain't playing.
It's typically a night for childhood fun and adventure. This phrase conjures images of unadulterated joy, a kaleidoscope of bright colors and innocent laughter that defines one of the most beloved annual celebrations. Halloween, in its very essence, is designed as a whimsical departure from reality, a festive occasion where the boundaries between the known and the fantastical blur in a playful, controlled manner. For children, it is a rite of passage, an evening anticipated for weeks, filled with the promise of sugary treats and the thrill of donning a chosen persona, however fleeting. The air, crisp with the arrival of autumn, usually carries the scent of burning leaves, the faint aroma of cocoa, and the sweet perfume of countless candies. It is a time when streetlights become beacons for small adventurers, when decorated porches glow with pumpkin grins, and every doorbell rung holds a potential for a delightful surprise. This communal spirit, rooted in generations of tradition, emphasizes safety, connection, and the shared delight of make-believe. It was about 2011. The year anchors us to a specific historical context, a period not so long ago, yet one that already feels distinct. In 2011, society was navigating the aftermath of a global economic recession, adapting to rapidly evolving digital technologies, and, in many ways, cherishing simple, tangible pleasures like community gatherings and family rituals even more. It was a time when the veneer of suburban peace, especially in an expanding Californian community, was often fiercely maintained. An unspoken covenant that such safe havens would remain free from profound disturbances. This temporal setting reinforces the ordinary framework within which an extraordinary tragedy would unfold. I was just here to take my kids out trick-or-treating. This statement, offered by a seasoned law enforcement professional, Detective Wayne Miller, with the Manteca Police, is particularly poignant. It grounds the unfolding horror in a profoundly relatable human experience. Here is a man dedicated to upholding law and order, yet also a father, eager to step out of his uniform and into the role of protector and guide for his own children on. This special night, his personal commitment to creating happy childhood memories mirrors the universal aspirations of parents everywhere. The simple act of trick-or-treating encapsulates the innocence of the evening. The expectation that any monsters encountered would be fabric, plastic, or simply children with painted faces, entirely harmless. This personal detail from a future key investigator serves to highlight the universal nature of the disrupted piece, signaling that this was not merely a case number for him, but an intrusion into the very fabric of community and family life, much like his own. A time for candy and costumes, masks and capes and that kind of stuff. The imagery continues to build a picture of innocence and revelry. Candy, a simple indulgence, represents a sweet reward for daring to knock on a stranger's door. Costumes, whether elaborate or improvised, symbolize the playful act of transformation, the joy of temporarily shedding one's identity for another, more fantastical one. Masks, often central to Halloween lore, are traditionally symbols of playful disguise, instruments for harmless theatrics, designed to add an element of mystery and fun to the festivities. Capes, flowing dramatically behind young heroes and villains, enhance the sense of adventure and imaginative play. These elements combine to create a tapestry of lightheartedness, where fear is purely performative, a thrill manufactured for amusement. But that Halloween, for one California community, not all the monsters were make-believe. This stark sentence acts as a narrative pivot, plunging the story from the realm of lighthearted fun into the chilling grip of reality. The innocent masks and capes are replaced by the grim realization that true malevolence can hide in plain sight, and that some monsters are not confined to folklore or fantasy films but walk among us. The reference to one California community narrows the focus, emphasizing the localized shock and devastation, making the horror intimately personal for those who live there. This transition immediately establishes the core tension of the narrative, the collision of joyful tradition with brutal, unexpected evil. She can't stop ones. It was excessively violent. It was obviously a brutal crime. The forensic insight embedded in the phrase "can't stop ones" speaks volumes to the psychological state of the perpetrator. In criminal psychology, this refers to wounds inflicted with ferocity and repetitive motion that transcends what is necessary to subdue or kill. It suggests an uncontrolled outburst of rage, a deep-seated fury manifesting as a sustained, almost ritualistic attack. The very terminology implies a loss of control, an unstoppable, relentless drive that propels the assailant beyond any logical or efficient action. The word excessively further underscores this point, highlighting a degree of violence that goes far beyond the immediate objective, hinting at profound emotional disturbance or a pathological hatred driving the perpetrator. When a crime is described as obviously a brutal crime, it means that even a layperson, upon encountering the scene, would instinctively recoil from the sheer savagery displayed. It wasn't just a killing, it was a deliberate act of profound destruction, marked by a palpable intent to inflict extreme suffering and damage, a terrifying testament to the depths of human malevolence. It was just vicious. This simple adjective encapsulates the raw, visceral impact of the crime. Vicious implies a cruel, savage, and morally repugnant act, devoid of mercy or restraint. It speaks to the psychological trauma inflicted not just on the victim, but on all who encountered the aftermath or heard of the details. The brevity of the description only enhances its power, leaving little doubt as to the heinous nature of the attack. The victim is a beloved mother of four. This detail immediately humanizes the deceased, transforming her from a mere statistic into a central figure of a grieving family and a shocked community. The fact that she was a mother of four highlights her role as a matriarch, a caregiver, a source of stability and love for multiple individuals. Her loss ripples through many lives, underscoring profound human cost of such a crime. It immediately invokes empathy and questions why such a central and nurturing figure would become the target of such unbridled violence. My mom loved doing things for other people and helping people. This tender observation, likely from one of her children, paints a vivid portrait of Kathleen McGee's benevolent nature. It speaks to her inherent kindness, her selfless disposition, and her active engagement in supporting those around her. This characteristic further amplifies the sense of injustice, making her an unlikely target for such ferocity. Such a person, one who extends herself to others, typically inspires affection and gratitude, not hatred. The contrast between her loving spirit and the violent end she met forms a crucial emotional core for the entire narrative, forcing us to grapple with the disturbing question of who could possibly wish such ill upon a genuinely good person. She was one of the sweetest ladies that you could talk to. Another testament to Kathleen's gentle character. This description rounds out the perception of her as a compassionate, approachable individual. Such an attribute makes the brutal nature of her death all the more perplexing and tragic. In forensic psychology, understanding the victim's character is not about placing blame, but about building a complete picture of the environment, identifying potential motives by ruling out common ones, like vengeance from a past wrongdoing, and focusing investigative efforts where they are most likely to yield answers. A sweet person, generally admired and cherished, presents a criminal profile anomaly, compelling investigators to look beyond typical scenarios of interpersonal conflict driven by malice or retribution, and instead consider far more unsettling possibilities. The brutal murder sends shockwaves through the community. Manteca, a relatively tight-knit and developing suburban area, likely prided itself on its sense of security. A crime of this magnitude, particularly one so savage and unexpected, shatters that illusion of safety. The shockwave would manifest not just as fear, but as profound disorientation, a breach of the communal trust that allows people to feel safe in their homes and neighborhoods. Parents would instinctively tighten their grip on their children. Neighbors would eye each other with new suspicion, and a collective sense of vulnerability would descend upon the town. This emotional aftermath is a critical element of the victim impact, extending far beyond the immediate family. They lived in a good neighborhood, in a quiet neighborhood. This statement reinforces the unexpected nature of the crime. Good neighborhoods often imply low crime rates, strong community bonds, and a sense of collective responsibility for well-being. Quiet neighborhoods suggest peaceful domesticity, free from overt conflict or commotion. The presence of such extreme violence in such a setting creates a profound dissonance, forcing residents to reevaluate their fundamental assumptions about their safety and the presence of evil. It highlights the disturbing truth that malevolence can infiltrate any environment, regardless of its superficial serenity. But here you have a dead woman on Halloween night. This chilling juxtaposition is central to the eerie atmosphere surrounding the case. Halloween, traditionally a night when the dead are playfully acknowledged, suddenly takes on a sinister, literal meaning. The contrast between the festive masks and the brutal reality of a homicide on such a night creates an almost cinematic horror, imbuing the event with a deeply unsettling symbolism. The choice of the phrase dead woman rather than murder victim momentarily strips away the legalistic term and emphasizes the stark finality of life taken. And the terror intensifies as the investigation leads down a chilling path. The initial shock gives way to a creeping dread as specific details begin to emerge, pushing the community's anxieties from generalized fear to concrete apprehension. The investigative path is rarely a straight line, but in this instance, it seems to uncover elements that only deepen the unsettling nature of the crime, confirming that this was no random act, but something far more disturbing and deliberate. The chilling path suggests a journey into the twisted recesses of a criminal mind. We found masks like Jason would wear in the Friday the 13th movies. This particular discovery is incredibly significant from a criminal psychology perspective. The fictional character Jason Voorhees, from the Friday the 13th franchise, is an iconic symbol of relentless, unreasoning, and often supernatural violence. The hockey mask he wears is a cultural signifier of cold, methodical brutality and an unfeeling, anonymous killer. Finding such masks immediately links the crime to a potential fascination with horror tropes, suggesting that the perpetrator may be drawing inspiration or identity from cinematic violence. This isn't just a costume. It's a statement, a chosen avatar of terror. It hints at a distorted reality, where the line between fantasy and horrifying truth has completely collapsed for the individual. The use of such a prop suggests either an attempt to conceal identity and instill fear, or perhaps more disturbingly, an immersion into the persona of a cinematic monster, a grim echo of the make-believe theme of Halloween twisted into a horrifying reality. He did believe he was either possessed with or seeing demons. This revelation immediately shifts the psychological analysis from simple rage to potential psychosis or severe delusion. A belief in possession or active perception of demons points towards a significant break from reality, where the internal world of the individual is populated by terrifying entities that may be dictating actions or influencing perceptions. This could suggest a thought disorder, severe mental illness, or even substance-induced psychosis. While this does not excuse criminal behavior, it offers a window into the internal chaos that might have driven such an extreme act. This statement adds a layer of complex and deeply troubling mental health issues to the developing profile of the assailant. And before it's all over, one family will be forced to confront the evil in their midst. This powerful foreshadowing introduces the ultimate tragedy, the betrayal and devastating realization that the source of horror originated within the intimate circle of trust. It speaks to the shattering of family bonds, the destruction of foundational love, and the horrific acceptance that someone once cherished harbored such darkness. The phrase, evil in their midst, conveys not just criminal intent, but a profound moral failing, a deliberate turning away from humanity that strikes at the very heart of familial identity. This is arguably the most heartbreaking aspect of any intrafamilial crime. I've never in a million years expected that he would suddenly go from dependent and manipulative to suddenly violent. This direct quote, almost certainly from a family member, encapsulates the disbelief and shock that often accompanies a revelation of a crime committed by a loved one. The progression from dependent and manipulative to violent is a critical psychological transition. Dependency and manipulation, while damaging and often exhausting for family members, operate within a psychological framework of covert control and emotional exploitation. Violence, particularly the kind of excessive brutality witnessed here, represents a qualitative leap into overt aggression and physical harm. This family member's statement highlights the perceived rupture in personality, where established patterns of problematic but nonviolent behavior suddenly erupt into extreme aggression, demonstrating the unforeseen and terrifying potential for escalation within a disturbed individual. It reveals a failure to predict, born of love and hope, that ultimately proved catastrophic. Manteca, California, October 31st, 2011. It's Halloween in this town of 75,000, over an hour east of San Francisco Bay. This reestablishes the setting and time with precision, bringing us back to the moment the tragic events began to unfold. Manteca, a city of 75,000 residents, signifies a community large enough to possess urban conveniences, yet small enough for residents to experience a sense of connection and shared identity. Its location, over an hour east of San Francisco Bay, situates it within the broader Californian landscape, indicating its role as a growing commuter suburb, a place where many might seek refuge from the high costs and frantic pace of the Bay Area, hoping for a quieter, more affordable lifestyle. The date and holiday immediately primed the audience for the narrative's central theme of innocence, corrupted. Manteca is a little bit more than a suburb. It's actually become a suburb of the Bay Area, which is crazy. This colloquial description by a resident reflects the evolving demographics and character of the city. What might once have been a standalone agricultural town or a regional hub has transformed into a bedroom community for the distant metropolitan areas. The speaker's use of crazy conveys a slight disbelief at the rapid urbanization and integration into the broader Bay Area economy, underscoring how quickly communities can change. This context is important as it suggests a dynamic population, perhaps with a mix of long-time residents and newer arrivals, all of whom are now united in the face of this unexpected terror. It implies a community grappling with its identity, now further complicated by a profound breach of its assumed peace. And as darkness begins to fall that evening, parents rush home from work to ready the candy and costumes. This idyllic scene captures the universal rhythm of Halloween afternoon. The transition from the workday grind to domestic festivity is a moment of anticipation and joy for families, parents, likely exhausted from their professional responsibilities, nonetheless find renewed energy in the prospect of creating magical memories for their children. The mental checklist of candy inventories, costume adjustments, and carving pumpkin grins are common, heartwarming rituals. It's a moment of collective preparation, of small sacrifices made for the sake of a child's happiness. Parents like Detective Wayne Miller with the Manteca Police. This reintroduces our key law enforcement figure, further solidifying his relatability and the deep irony of his evening's interruption. His role as both a police detective and a father underscores the dual impact of the impending crime. It affects him personally as a parent within the community, and professionally as an officer sworn protected. It also means that when he is called to the scene, he arrives not just with professional detachment, but with the heightened awareness of a parent whose own evening has just been drastically altered, lending his eventual observations additional weight and human context. I just got home from working my regular shift and just getting my kids out trick or treating. This first-person account from Detective Miller humanizes him entirely. He was not a distant, anonymous figure in a squad car. He was a community, sharing its customs, its joys, and soon its sorrows. The simple domesticity of just getting my kids out trick or treating stands in stark contrast to the horrifying call he is about to receive, a call that will rip him from the warm embrace of family festivity and plunge him into the cold, stark reality of violent death. This moment represents the final flickering of normalcy before the darkness of crime truly descends. But what the community of Manteca doesn't know as they head out that night for a little lighthearted fun with the kids is that this Halloween, the terror will be real, and so will the blood and gore. This statement delivers a chilling promise of impending doom. Ratcheting up the suspense and foreboding, it serves as a narrative marker, explicitly drawing a line between the festive innocence and the brutal truth that will soon emerge. The words terror will be real dispel any notion that this is merely a story of fictional fright, while the phrase blood and gore, though generalized to avoid explicit detail, leaves no doubt as to the visceral violence that has occurred. This sentence dramatically raises the stakes, preparing the audience for a journey into genuine horror. It's just before 6 o'clock that evening when Caitlin McGehee tries to wake her mother, Kathleen. The precise time, just before 6 o'clock, marks the precise moment of transition from domestic calm to escalating concern. This specific detail provides a clear anchor in the timeline of the evening, crucial for later forensic reconstruction and understanding the window of the crime. Caitlin McGehee, a daughter returning home, is the first point of contact with the unsettling quiet within the household. unwittingly stepping into the first act of a personal tragedy. Her simple attempt to wake her mother masks the terrifying discovery that is about to be made. Caitlin knocks on her mother's bedroom door, which is shut. Her mother doesn't answer. This scene immediately evokes a sense of growing unease. A shut door, a common barrier of privacy, suddenly becomes partition behind which something ominous might lie. The silence within is not merely an absence of sound, but a pregnant emptiness, a deviation from the expected domestic responses. Kathleen, usually attentive and responsive, failing to answer a simple knock from her daughter, immediately registers as abnormal in a household where routine interactions define normalcy. This initial non-response is the first domino in a sequence of alarming events. The fact that her 55-year-old mother doesn't respond worries Caitlin. Caitlin's immediate worry is a natural, empathetic response. At 55, Kathleen McGehee is still relatively young, but the unspoken anxieties that adult children often harbor for their aging parents come to the forefront. A missed call or an unanswered knock might be dismissed on another day, but given Kathleen's specific health considerations, Caitlin's concern rapidly elevates from mild inconvenience to genuine alarm. This worry demonstrates the deep familial bond and Caitlin's intuitive sense that something is profoundly amiss, setting the stage for her escalating fear. Mom is on the edge of diabetes. She might have some insulin issues. Maybe the diet she's on has backfired and she might have fainted. These specific health concerns provide crucial context for Caitlin's anxiety, framing her initial thoughts not around foul play, but around medical emergencies, diabetes management, particularly for someone on the edge, requires careful attention to diet and routine. Insulin issues could lead to a variety of debilitating symptoms, from disorientation to unconsciousness, the possibility of fainting, perhaps as a consequence of a backfired diet, is a logical and indeed hopeful explanation, representing the brain's attempt to rationalize an alarming situation within familiar parameters, far from the terrifying truth. And her fear intensifies as she tries the door again. She knocked louder and called her mom. There was no response. The escalating intensity of Caitlin's actions mirrors the deepening knot of dread in her stomach. The repeated, louder knocking is a more urgent plea, an attempt to break through the impenetrable silence. Calling out her mother's name is a desperate reach for reassurance, for any sign of life. The no response is now deafening, confirming her deepest fears that this is more than just a typical nap or a temporary medical setback. Each unanswered attempt tightens a grip of an unspoken dread. And she tried the door. Now having found it was locked, that's when Caitlin starts to panic. Her mom doesn't usually lock the door when she's taking a nap, so by the time she's kind of pounding on the door, no response. The discovery of the locked door is a final trigger for full-blown panic. This is not just a detail. It's a critical piece of information that immediately deviates from Kathleen's established habits. The implicit rule of an unlocked door during a nap is a subtle but significant marker of security, an openness within a trusted family environment. The breach of this routine, coupled with the persistent silence despite her pounding on the door, pushes Caitlin from anxiety into a state of profound alarm. Her intuition screams that this is no ordinary medical incident. Something gravely wrong has transpired. She does go around to the outside of the house to try to look into the window. She's not able to. See, the lines are drawn. Caitlin's desperate improvisation to gain insight reflects the primal urge to protect and to understand what is happening to a loved one. Circumnavigating the house to look through the bedroom window is a logical next step, a desperate attempt to bypass the lock barrier and pierce the mystery. However, the obstructing drawn blinds or curtains effectively block her view, metaphorically and literally obscuring the horrifying reality within. This denial of visual confirmation further intensifies her panic and helplessness, solidifying the realization that the situation is beyond her immediate control or understanding. Unsure what to do, Caitlin calls her older brother, Justin. Faced with a situation beyond her immediate capacity to resolve, Caitlin turns to an older sibling for guidance and support. This is a common and appropriate coping mechanism, seeking help from a trusted family member when overwhelmed. Justin, as an older brother, represents a figure of authority and strength, someone who can process information rationally and provide decisive action in a crisis. The decision to call him demonstrates Caitlin's complete emotional and practical exhaustion, admitting her inability to tackle the unfolding enigma alone. And I said, Caitlin, I'm on my way. Hang up the phone and call the police right now. 911. Justin's immediate and decisive response highlights his protective instinct and clear-headed, thinking under pressure. His simultaneous command to hang up with him and immediately dial emergency services is the quintessential instruction for anyone facing a potential crisis where time is of the essence. The direct mention of 911 emphasizes the gravity of the situation, shifting the urgency from a family matter to a matter for professional intervention, confirming that the threshold of potential emergency has been unequivocally crossed. His response offers immediate reassurance and validation of Caitlin's fears, without dismissing them. My mother has been in the room with the door locked. She's not responding when I knock on the door. This is a fragment of the urgent distress call to emergency services. Caitlin's words are likely rushed, tinged with panic, but contain the essential information: a locked door, an unresponsive parent, and a palpable sense of alarm. The repeated emphasis on a locked door conveys the unusual circumstances, while the lack of response after knocking underscores the urgency of her mother's condition. This initial dispatch detail sets in motion the official response, initiating the chain of events that will soon reveal the unspeakable truth. And she's diabetic and found a sleep apnea. I'm just worried something's wrong with her. Okay. Caitlin continues her distress call, providing the crucial medical context that initially frames the emergency. Her mother's diabetic condition and sleep apnea are legitimate health concerns that could explain an unresponsiveness. The desperate plea, I'm just worried something's wrong with her, encapsulates the emotional core of her call, a child's primal fear for a parent's well-being. The simple, almost tentative okay at the end of her statement betrays a glimmer of hope that help is indeed on its way, that perhaps everything will be all right, a hope that would soon be tragically dashed. The police company and fire department both responded. They were able to remove the lock from the door. The swift and coordinated response of multiple emergency services demonstrates the standard protocol for such calls, where medical welfare and potential safety concerns necessitate a combined approach. The phrase police company, likely referring to the police department or units, and fire department, signifies the deployment of specialized teams, paramedics for medical aid, and firefighters often equipped for forced entry. The physical act of remove the lock from the door is a decisive breach of privacy, a necessary intervention that shatters the domestic barrier and prepares a way for the terrifying discovery beyond. And moments later, as he's racing to the scene, Justin McGehee gets a second call from his sister. The frantic urgency of Justin racing to the scene speaks to the critical, time-sensitive nature of the emergency and his deep familial concern. His proximity to the escalating crisis is highlighted by this second, equally urgent call from Caitlin. The fact that she is calling him again, while emergency services are still actively engaged, signals a rapid and catastrophic deterioration of the situation, leaving no doubt that the initial fears have not only been confirmed but profoundly magnified. This second call delivers the brutal confirmation of the worst possible outcome. She was sobbing so hard I couldn't understand what she was saying, but eventually it became clear that she was saying she's dead. This description vividly portrays the sheer, raw grief and emotional breakdown that engulfed Caitlin. Sobbing so hard I couldn't understand speaks to an intensity of emotion that borders on inarticulate, a primal lament that transcends language. The agonizing process of piecing together her distraught words to finally discern she's dead is a moment of profound devastation for Justin, a gut-wrenching realization that their worst fears have been horrifyingly confirmed. This personal account conveys the deep, immediate impact of Kathleen's death on her children. Not only is Justin and Caitlin's mother dead, what greets the first responders beyond her locked door is a scene straight out of a slasher movie. This stark declaration expands a tragedy beyond a simple death to an act of extreme violence, explicitly linking the reality to the fictional horrors of the Halloween holiday. The phrase, seen straight out of a slasher movie, is a powerful descriptor, implying not just death, but a brutal, visually disturbing, and perhaps theatrical display of violence. It indicates a chaotic and bloody tableau, reminiscent of the fictionalized brutality that so often permeates horror genres, making the actual crime all the more horrifying due to its gruesome realism. This shocking visual detail provides an immediate context for the level of violence endured by the victim. They found Kathleen McGehee in the bedroom lying on her back with multiple stab wounds to her torso and neck. This concise description provides critical details of the crime scene. Kathleen's position, lying on her back, could indicate she fell backward during assault or was moved, while multiple stab wounds to her torso and neck denotes the specific areas of severe injury. The torso, housing vital organs, and the neck, containing major arteries and airways, are highly vulnerable areas. This detail, though not graphically descriptive, communicates the lethal intent and the severity of the attack, affirming the initial assessment of extreme violence. These injuries are consistent with an assailant determined to inflict maximum harm. Based on the amount of blood that is around the body, this was definitely a crime scene. The presence of significant amount of blood is an undeniable indicator of a violent confrontation and fatal injuries. Blood is a key element of forensic evidence, providing crucial insights into the nature of the attack, the duration of the struggle, and even the type of weapon used. For any first responder or detective, an extensive blood trail or pooling immediately transforms a welfare check into a homicide investigation. The declaration, definitely a crime scene, removes all doubt, confirming that Kathleen's death was not due to natural causes or accident, but was a result of a deliberate violent act. But who would want to murder a beloved mother for? This question echoes the central mystery of the case, articulating the fundamental bewilderment that often surrounds such brutal crimes, especially when the victim appears to be universally cherished. The act of murder itself is abhorrent, but the target, a beloved mother of four, makes it even more incomprehensible. This interrogative introduces the psychological puzzle. What kind of motive, what degree of hatred or delusion could drive someone to commit such an atrocity against a figure so central and revered in her family and community? It pushes the narrative towards the search for the assailant's identity and the underlying psychological drivers. She was one of the sweetest ladies that you could talk to. This repeated testament to Kathleen's character further underscores the profound dissonance between the victim's nature and the brutality of her death. Such an attribute makes motives like revenge or pre-existing feud seem unlikely, thereby complicating the initial investigative hypotheses. It emphasizes her gentle and approachable demeanor, making her an exceptionally unlikely candidate for such a vicious attack, thus intensifying the puzzle for both investigators and the wider public. And even more mysteriously, did the date have something to do with her death? Here you have a dead woman on Halloween night. This query, framed as even more mysteriously, adds another layer of profound and unsettling questions to the investigation. The synchronicity of the murder with Halloween, a holiday traditionally associated with ghoulish imagery, costumes, and symbolic death, introduces a possibility of ritualistic or psychologically motivated timing. The grim coincidence demands exploration. Was it merely a macabre backdrop, or was it deliberate, perverse choice by the perpetrator to use the festive night as cover, or even as an ironic statement. This question pushes a psychological analysis deeper into the potential symbolism and planning behind the crime, suggesting a perpetrator with a twisted sense of narrative or opportunity. It was eerie. This single adjective powerfully encapsulates the prevailing atmosphere surrounding the crime. Eerie suggests not just fear, but a sense of uncanny disturbance, a feeling that something is profoundly out of place or supernatural, fitting perfectly with the Halloween context. It speaks to an unsettling quality that defies easy explanation, hinting at dark undertones and a pervasive sense of unease that lingered over the community. Following the discovery, the term conveys a deeper, almost metaphysical disquiet. Like a lot of upper-middle-class families in suburban Manteca, the Muggees had moved in from elsewhere. They were from the Bay Area, and they had, I think, been here about 10 years. This demographic detail provides important social and economic context. Upper-middle-class families implies a certain lifestyle, stability, and often professional backgrounds. The pattern of MOVING and from elsewhere, specifically from the Bay Area, reflects the broader migration trends in California, where individuals and families seek more affordable housing and a different quality of life away from major metropolitan centers. The 10 years residency suggests they were well established, part of the fabric of Manteca, rather than newcomers. This background helps the investigation understand their social networks and history within the community, providing a foundation for understanding their lives and interactions prior to the tragedy. Kathleen and her husband, Tom, had met when they were in college. Mom and Dad were going to 2 different universities, or colleges, at the time, and they were each involved in sort of Christian fellowship ministry. This flashback to Kathleen and Tom's early life paints a picture of a relationship built on shared values and spiritual connection. Meeting in college, a formative period of personal growth, often implies intellectual and emotional bonding. Their involvement in a Christian fellowship ministry suggests a foundational commitment to faith, community service, and ethical principles, traits that would profoundly influence their lives and family values. This origin story helps to establish their moral compass and the kind of nurturing environment they aim to create. Although for Kathleen and Tom, fellowship turned into something more. It didn't take them very long to decide that we're supposed to be together. This beautiful sentiment highlights the powerful and swift development of their romantic bond. The transition from spiritual fellowship to romantic partnership, described as something more, suggests a natural and deeply felt connection. The phrase, "It didn't take them very long to decide that we're supposed to be together," conveys a sense of destiny, a strong mutual conviction that they have found their lifelong partner. This detail solidifies their relationship as a love story, a testament to enduring commitment, thereby making the eventual tragedy of Kathleen's death even more profound in contrast to the joyful beginnings of their union. The couple got married and moved to Chicago soon after. My dad went to Moody Bible Institute. He learned Greek. It's nice to be able to read the old manuscripts yourself. So I was born while they were over there. This progression of their early life post-marriage provides specific biographical details, sketching out their early shared journey. Their move to Chicago and Tom's pursuit of studies at Moody Bible Institute indicate a continued dedication to their religious calling, suggesting a life initially oriented toward spiritual work. The detail about Tom learning Greek and the personal benefit of read ing the old manuscripts yourself speaks to intellectual curiosity and deep scholarly engagement within their faith. The mention, "So I was born while they were over there," provides a timeline marker establishing the birth of their first child in this early chapter of their married life, contextualizing the origins of their family. A second son followed, and to support their growing family, Tom put his dreams of the ministry on hold. They moved back to California. and we're here ever since. This narrative development illustrates the sacrifices and practical adjustments often required of young families. The arrival of a second son increased their responsibilities, prompting a pragmatic shift in Tom's career aspirations. The decision to put his dreams of the ministry on hold reveals a prioritization of family, stability and financial security over personal vocational goals, a common, noble parental choice. Their return back to California marked a new chapter, suggesting a return to roots or desire for new opportunities, setting the stage for their long-term residence in the state. Back in California, Tom put his neck for languages to work. The father is an international businessman. Tom worked a lot, out of the country. He was gone the majority of the time, months at a time, and then would come home for a period of time and then be gone on another trip. This details Tom's career path, emphasizing his intellectual capabilities and the practicalities of his professional life. His neck for languages implies a natural aptitude, a skill that transitioned from theological study to practical application in the global marketplace. His identity as an international businessman explains his frequent and extended absences from home, often for months at a time. This lifestyle, while providing for the family, created a dynamic where Kathleen was often the primary, consistent parent, a crucial detail for understanding the family's internal structure and interdependencies, especially concerning Dawson. Meanwhile, Kathleen was a stay-at-home mom. Once in California, the couple had 2 more children, third son Dawson, born in 1985, and daughter Caitlin, the youngest. This outlines Kathleen's central role in the household and the growth of their family. As a stay-at-home mom, Kathleen dedicated herself fully to raising her children, a demanding and invaluable role. The births of third son Dawson, born in 1985, and daughter Caitlin, the youngest, completed their family unit, spanning a decade in childbearing. Dawson's birth year, 1985, becomes particularly significant as it marks his age, 26, at the time of the murder, providing context for his stage of life and the family's history with him. Mom loved being pregnant. She loved having babies. She loved having kids. She was a very nurturing person, and she devoted all of her time to raising the kids. These heartwarming details reaffirm Kathleen's profound maternal instinct and her selfless dedication to her family. Her expressed joy in being pregnant and having babies speaks to a deep, inherent love for motherhood, seeing it as a fulfilling and central purpose. The description, very nurturing person, encapsulates her core identity as a compassionate and supportive figure. Her devotion of all of her time to raising the kids solidifies her role as the anchor of the family, highlighting the immense effort and love she poured into her children's upbringing. This makes her brutal murder even more tragically incongruous. When we became old enough for school, they decided to homeschool us. My mom continued to be a stay-at-home mom, but she was also, if you will, a teacher for different grades. The decision to homeschool us reflects a profound commitment to their children's education and often stems from deeply held pedagogical or religious convictions. This choice further cemented Kathleen's role as a primary educator and daily presence in her children's lives. The description of her as a teacher for different grades humorously but accurately conveys the enormous organizational and intellectual demands placed upon her, requiring her to manage multiple curricula simultaneously. It highlights her dedication and capacity for complex, demanding caregiving, transforming her into a multifaceted stay-at-home mom with extraordinary responsibilities. Kathleen excelled at it, too. If her bright and talented children were any indication, they were all very intelligent. They were musicians. All of them played some sort of instrument, if not many instruments. This commendation underscores Kathleen's effectiveness as a mother and educator, linking her efforts directly to the demonstrable achievements of her children. their shared intelligence and musical talent, where all of them played some sort of instrument, if not many instruments, paints a picture of a well-rounded, artistically inclined, and intellectually stimulated family. This collective success speaks volumes about the rich, nurturing, and challenging environment Kathleen cultivated. It further establishes her positive impact on the world, reinforcing the inexplicable horror of her death. And in the mid-90s, Kathleen and Tom moved the family to Manteca. They wanted to own a home. They couldn't afford that in the Bay Area. The family's move in the mid-90s to Manteca provides another crucial historical marker, tying their long-term presence in the community to economic and lifestyle decisions. Their desire to own a home reflects the classic American dream, an aspiration often out of reach in the Bay Area due to its notoriously high cost of living. Manteca thus offered them a viable pathway to achieving a fundamental component of suburban stability and raising a family with a sense of rootedness and ownership. This detail reinforces their middle-class aspirations and how they came to be residents of Manteca. Over the next decade, the kids all grew up and left for college. Once my mom didn't have a bunch of kids running around, the house to take care of, I kind of wondered what she was going to get involved with. This passage illustrates the natural progression of family life as children mature and seek independence. The departure for college signifies the successful launch of Kathleen's well-educated children into adulthood, the shift from a bustling household to a quieter home environment, where Kathleen didn't have a bunch of kids running around the house to take care of, marks a new chapter in her life. The internal query, I kind of wondered what she was going to get involved with, highlights a void that can open for a dedicated parent whose primary role has been nurturing children, suggesting a moment of personal transition and rediscovery for Kathleen. For Kathleen, that wound up being a return to her religious roots. She and my dad started attending the church that my wife and I go to in Stockton, which is an evangelical covenant church. This explains Kathleen's path to re-engagement and community involvement, reaffirming the enduring importance of faith in her life. Her return to her religious roots suggests a renewal or deepening of her spiritual commitment after the intensity of raising children. The detail that she and Tom began attending an evangelical covenant church in Stockton, the same one her adult son and daughter-in-law attend, highlights a continued family connection and shared spiritual path, reinforcing the deep integration of faith into their lives. This context is important for understanding Kathleen's character and later community work. I got to know Katie as a member of the church. She was quiet, but she was passionate when you were able to sit and talk with her about things that really pulled at her heart. This personal testimony from someone within her church community provides a nuanced and intimate portrait of Kathleen, referred to affectionately as Katie. Her described quiet demeanor might belie an inner intensity, a common trait among individuals with deep convictions. However, the statement that she was passionate when you were able to sit and talk with her about things that really pulled at her heart reveals a core of profound empathy and strong personal investment in issues of justice and suffering. This detail foreshadows her eventual calling, demonstrating that her quiet exterior concealed a powerful sense of moral purpose and deep emotional intelligence. At the church, Kathleen became an avid volunteer. My mom loved doing things for other people and helping people, and she soon found her calling. She became a part of our Advocates for Victims of Abuse program that we have. This describes Kathleen's natural progression into dedicated community service, perfectly aligning with her empathetic character. Becoming an avid volunteer is a testament to her generous spirit and her desire to contribute actively to her community. The reiteration that her mom loved doing things for other people and helping people underscores this innate benevolence. Her involvement with the Advocates for Victims of Abuse program within the church marks a profound discovery of her true calling, channeling her deep compassion into a structured, impactful initiative to protect the vulnerable. What that group does is it ministers to women from it could be sexual violence, and it could be home or spousal abuse. She was good at it, too. She would say, "This is for me to do," and then she would learn aggressively, almost obsessively about it, because it wasn't okay to go halfway. This detailed description of the program and Kathleen's dedication highlights the demanding yet essential nature of her volunteer work. Minister NG to women from sexual violence and home or spousal abuse identifies the severe and sensitive nature of the issues she confronted. Her excellence in this role, affirmed by she was good at it, too, points to her intrinsic ability to connect and provide support. The quote, "This is for me to do," conveys a profound sense of purpose and mission, suggesting a calling that resonated deeply with her moral and compassionate core. Her approach, to learn aggressively, almost obsessively about it because it wasn't okay to go halfway, reveals her thoroughness, her ethical commitment, and her desire to be truly effective in her advocacy. This dedication would, ironically, provide her a profound understanding of manipulation and victim dynamics, which would later play a critical role in her own family life. She would at times ask me to pray for her as she was reaching out to women or children involved in abuse. But on Halloween of 2011, it would be Kathleen's children who needed prayers, and she would be the victim. This profound statement is heavy with tragic irony and foreshadowing. Kathleen's request for prayer before reaching out to women or children involved in abuse reveal her compassionate heart, her recognition of the spiritual and emotional weight of her work, and her humility in seeking divine support for such difficult tasks. This context elevates her character, showcasing her as a selfless advocate. However, the pivot to, on Halloween of 2011, it would be Kathleen's children who needed prayers, and she would be the victim, delivers a devastating blow. It dramatically inverts the expected role of caregiver and recipient of prayers, placing Kathleen tragically on the other side of the equation as the one who desperately needed protection, while her own children were left to grapple with unimaginable grief and horror. This highlights the cruel capriciousness of fate and the deep injustice of her suffering. That October, Kathleen's husband Tom is away as usual. Tom was, I believe, in Japan or China on a business trip, but despite that, the house is more crowded than it's been in years. This situational detail provides critical context for the timing of the crime. Tom's absence, as usual, due to his international businessman role on a business trip, potentially in Japan or China, establishes a recurring pattern in the McGehee household. This consistent element meant Kathleen often managed the home affairs largely on her own, particularly for extended periods. However, the subsequent revelation that, despite that, the house is more crowded than it's been in years, introduces a significant deviation from the norm, indicating that other family members were present, a critical factor in understanding the domestic dynamics leading up to the tragedy. This creates a specific stage for the events to unfold. Caitlin was actually home. She was preparing to get married and preparing to move. Caitlin's older brother, Dawson, is also living at home, at least for the time being. This specifies the composition of the household at the time of the crime. Caitlin's presence, driven by her impending marriage preparations, preparing to get married and preparing to move, suggests a joyful, transitional period in her life. Her temporary stay underscores a bustling, engaged atmosphere. Critically, Caitlin's older brother, Dawson, is also living at home, at least for the time being, introduces the key figure. His continued residency, with the qualifier, at least for the time being, subtly hints at his unsettled status, contrasting with Caitlin's trajectory towards independence. This established the two children, who were currently residing in a house with Kathleen, setting the stage for their roles in the tragic events. He graduated from University of the Pacific. He was a music major and was very talented musically, and he was teaching music to elementary school students. This provides Dawson's academic and professional background, revealing aspects of his intelligence and capabilities. His graduation from University of the Pacific with a music major suggests intellectual capacity and dedication to an artistic pursuit. Being very talented musically further emphasizes his potential. The detail that he was teaching music to elementary school students offers a glimpse of a positive, contributing role he once held, a constructive engagement with the world that, in hindsight, would stand in stark contrast to his eventual actions. These accomplishments provide a baseline of his former functioning before the described decline. And Kathleen still has her volunteer commitments to keep up with, which has her scrambling in the kitchen on Sunday afternoon, October 30th. This detail reminds us of Kathleen's ongoing, active life beyond her family. Her volunteer commitments were a significant part of her identity, consuming her time and energy. The image of her scrambling in the kitchen on a specific date, Sunday afternoon, October 30th, paints a picture of a busy, engaged woman juggling multiple responsibilities. This precise timeline for her activities immediately preceding the murder is crucial for reconstructing the events and understanding her schedule. It establishes her as dynamic and committed up until the very last days of her life. She's making jambalaya for the domestic violence class. The next day, they're having a potluck. This specifies the nature of Kathleen's kitchen activities, directly linking them to her humanitarian work. Her preparing jambalaya for the domestic violence class underscores her commitment not just to the cause, but to the communal aspect of the support group, offering both sustenance and comfort. The mention of potluck the next day clarifies the purpose of her cooking, emphasizing her foresight and generosity. This detail illustrates her nurturing nature, extending beyond her immediate family to the wider community of vulnerable women she championed. But at a little before 5, the pot is off the stove and in the refrigerator, ready for the next day. And Kathleen quickly cleans up the kitchen because she has one last chore to do before the day is done. This precise timing of a little before 5 establishes a clear endpoint for her cooking activity. On Sunday, October 30th, providing vital information for the timeline of events. Kathleen's efficient action of putting the pot off the stove and in the refrigerator, ready for the next day, speaks to her organized and prepared nature. Her decision to quickly clean up the kitchen before moving on to one last chore shows her dedication to order and her proactive approach to daily tasks, reinforcing her structured and responsible personality. Pick up her daughter, Caitlin, who'd spent the weekend at a Christian ministry retreat. She left on a Friday and was coming back on a Sunday evening. This final pre-planned chore explains Kathleen's imminent departure from the house. Her duty to pick up her daughter, Caitlin, from a Christian ministry retreat, which Caitlin had attended from a Friday until Sunday evening, accounts for Caitlin's absence from the house immediately preceding the crime. This information is vital for the investigative timeline. Clarify who was where and when. It positions Kathleen at a specific point in her Sunday evening routine, just before her life would tragically end. So after washing the dishes and wiping down the counter, Kathleen dashes back to her bedroom to grab the keys off her dresser. She was planning on picking Caitlin up at 6 o'clock. This continuation of Kathleen's actions describes her final moments of ordinary activity. The image of her dashes ing back to her bedroom to grab the keys off her dresser implies a moment of hurried, purposeful action, eager to complete her task. The explicit mention that she was planning on picking Caitlin up at 6 o'clock provides an exact, temporal target, narrowing the window of opportunity for the attack and establishing her anticipated movements. These seemingly trivial details become incredibly significant in the unfolding tragedy, outlining her last known conscious intentions. But as she turns to leave, Kathleen freezes in terror, because looming in the doorway, Blocking her only escape is a knife-wielding killer in a Halloween mask. This is the pivotal, horrific moment of the crime's initiation. The sudden shift from routine purpose to freezes and terror conveys the shock and primal fear of unexpected, immediate danger. The perpetrator's position, looming in the doorway, blocking her only escape, immediately establishes a predatory advantage and traps the victim. The explicit details, a knife-wielding killer in a Halloween mask, are horrifying. The knife is the instrument of violence. The mask a symbol of concealed identity and macabre theatricality, twisting the innocent symbols of the holiday into instruments of dread. This is the moment where the festive fun of Halloween curdles into true, unadulterated horror. Coming up, the horrific murder strikes terror in the community. She had a constellation of stab wounds, consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill. This serves as a powerful preview, reaffirming the profound impact of the crime. The horrific murder will indeed continue to strike terror, highlighting its enduring emotional aftermath. The forensic detail, a constellation of stab wounds, consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill, is a critical piece of psychological evidence. Overkill implies an excess of force beyond what was necessary to cause death, often signaling extreme rage, intense personal hatred, or profound emotional disturbance on the part of the assailant. It suggests the act itself was driven by something beyond simple lethality, perhaps a desire for annihilation or a release of explosive, uncontrollable fury. This terminology prepares the audience for a deeper dive into the perpetrator's disturbed psyche, emphasizing the profound rage that must have fueled such an attack. But why had the mother ever been so brutally attacked? The houses meet orderly. There was no signs of any forced entry to the house. This query, why had the mother ever been so brutally attacked, is the core question driving the investigation. The brutality suggests a personal, perhaps pathological, motive. The subsequent forensic details, the houses meet orderly, and there was no signs of any forced entry to the house, are crucial. The lack of forced entry strongly indicates that the assailant was either known to the victim or gained access under non-confrontational circumstances, perhaps even with an invitation. This immediately narrows the pool of suspects, suggesting someone with a pre-existing relationship, or at least familiar enough with the household, to avoid forcible entry. It suggests an inside job, intensifying the fear that the threat lurked within, not without. At dusk on Halloween 2011, the streets of Manteca, California, were alive with groups of children eagerly going door to door. The scenic depiction reinforces the initial idyllic setup, painting a vivid picture of the Manteca community, exactly at the moment when the public perception of the night diverged from the grim reality unfolding inside one particular home. The phrase, alive with groups of children eagerly going door to door, captures the vibrant energy, the collective joy, and the sense of innocent pursuit that defines Halloween. The detail of dusk adds a mystical, liminal quality to the evening, a time when shadows lengthen and the boundary between day and night, reality and fantasy, seems thinnest. This serene backdrop makes a jarring intrusion of violence all the more jarring and tragically ironic. The image serves as a poignant reminder of the universal enjoyment that was being experienced, simultaneously with the unspeakable horror that had transpired, further underscoring the stark contrast between public festivity and private tragedy. This collective obliviousness highlights the isolating nature of a hidden crime, even amidst communal celebrations. But in one Manteca neighborhood, the trick-or-treaters were stopped in their tracks when police sirens descended on the suburban home of Tom and Kathleen McGehee. This sentence brings a narrative abruptly from the general, joyful scene to the specific, terrifying reality. The phrase trick-or-treaters were stopped in their tracks vividly portrays the immediate and profound disruption of innocent activities, freezing a moment of pure fun. The police sirens descend ing on the McGehee home act as an auditory and visual shockwave, shattering the illusion of safety and drawing a sharp line between playful fear and genuine menace. This convergence of emergency vehicles signifies the gravity of the unfolding situation, transforming an ordinary suburban street into a focal point of urgent official attention and communal dread. The sirens, once a distant abstraction, now screamed a terrible truth right on their own doorstep, signifying that something terribly, irrevocably wrong had happened within the previously quiet and esteemed residence. The sight of emergency responders on such a festive night, particularly in a good neighborhood, immediately raises alarm bells for every resident. Minutes earlier, firefighters and EMTs had responded to a 911 call from the couple's daughter, Caitlin. The call was just that they were concerned about Mom. She wasn't responding at the door, and she had some health concerns. This reconstructs the immediate preceding events that led to the emergency response, clarifying the initial low-key nature of the distress call. The prompt arrival of firefighters and EMTs, often the first on the scene for medical welfare checks, underscores the urgency dictated by the initial 911 call. Caitlin's concerns, phrased simply as being concerned about Mom, and her not responding at the door, combined with her health concerns, presented as a typical medical emergency. This highlights the gradual, horrifying shift from suspected illness to confirmed tragedy, emphasizing the unfolding discovery for first responders as much as for the family. The initial information given to emergency services carefully presented a scenario of natural health issues, masking the horrific reality that lay within the locked bedroom. But when the first responders broke down Kathleen's locked bedroom door, they stepped into a scene straight out of a horror movie. The 55-year-old mother of four lay, sprawled on the floor, dead. This delivers the visceral impact of the discovery. The forced entry, breaking through the locked bedroom door, immediately communicates the dramatic and invasive nature of the initial investigation, necessary to overcome the physical barrier to the truth. The phrase "stepped into a scene straight out of a horror movie" is not hyperbole, but an attempt by an eyewitness to convey the immediate, shocking, and profoundly disturbing visual reality of the crime. Kathleen's body, sprawled on the floor dead, conveys a sense of violence, disarray, and finality. The explicit age 55-year-old and her role as mother of four reinforces the tragedy of a vibrant life brutally cut short, underscoring the human cost behind a horrific scene. This discovery abruptly escalated the situation from a medical emergency to a full-blown homicide investigation. There had been multiple stab wounds to the upper torso at the precise moment that thousands of children were out roaming the streets. The Manteca police had a murder on their hands. The detailed multiple stab wounds to the upper torso specifies the gruesome nature and location of the injuries, confirming a brutal, intentional attack. This is a critical piece of forensic information for immediate assessment of cause of death. The stark contrast presented by, at the precise moment that thousands of children were out roaming the streets, the Manteca police had a murder on their hands, vividly highlights the disturbing juxtaposition of innocent childhood joy and horrifying adult violence. This parallelism imbues the crime with profoundly unsettling quality, transforming Halloween from a playful fantasy into a grim, blood-soaked reality for the Manteca authorities and community. The police, suddenly, faced a case that was not only heinous, but draped in the macabre symbolism of the holiday itself. There's not too many things that surprise you after you've been doing the job for a while, but every once in a while something like this comes along. This candid reflection from a seasoned police officer, likely Detective Miller, speaks to the desensitization that can occur in law enforcement due to repeated exposure to trauma and violence. Veteran officers often develop a degree of professional detachment, having seen nearly every conceivable human tragedy. However, the acknowledgement that every once in a while something like this comes along reveals that certain crimes are so egregious, so out of the ordinary, or so emotionally impactful that they penetrate even that hardened exterior. This case, given its brutal nature, its victim, and its unsettling Halloween backdrop, clearly fell into that rare category, profoundly affecting even experienced professionals. Across town, Detective Wayne Miller and his children were heading out the door for a night of trick-or-treating. I get a call from dispatch advising me of a homicide. This directly positions Detective Miller at the threshold of personal family joy and abrupt professional duty. The simple act of heading out the door for a night of trick-or-treating with his own children epitomizes the very normalcy and innocence that has just been brutally shattered elsewhere in Manteca. The terse, I get a call from dispatch advising me of a homicide, instantly severs his personal plans, wrenching him from the role of father to the grim realities of detective work. This narrative choice reinforces the devastating impact of crime on the entire community, illustrating how even those tasked with maintaining order are not immune to the disruption of their personal lives when tragedy strikes, compelling an immediate pivot from domestic comfort to grim, professional responsibility. The stark dichotomy underscores the unforeseen cruelty of that particular Halloween night. And when he arrived at the scene, Detective Miller immediately realized that Halloween wasn't the only thing that made this murder unusual. This observation, coming from the detective himself, signals a deeper, more unsettling complexity to the crime than simply its holiday timing. The initial unusual quality might be attributed to the date, but upon arrival, Miller perceives characteristics that set this homicide apart from typical cases. This hints at disturbing elements within the crime scene or the circumstances that point towards a motive or perpetrator far from the norm, indicating that the oddity extended beyond the superficial connection to costumes and candy. The experienced detective's intuition is already detecting profoundly disturbing layers beneath the surface, elevating the case beyond a mere unfortunate occurrence. The house was in an upper-middle-class neighborhood, not a place we typically would expect this kind of call. This detail explicitly highlights the class and geographic anomaly of the crime, further confirming its unusual nature from an investigative standpoint. Upper-middle-class neighborhood typically suggests a stable environment with fewer of the socioeconomic stressors often associated with violent crime. Therefore, the phrase, not a place we typically would expect this kind of call, reflects the rarity and unexpectedness of such a brutal homicide in this specific demographic setting. It means investigators couldn't easily fall back on established profiles or known hotspots for violence, forcing them to look beyond conventional explanations and to approach the case without preconceptions, amplifying the sense of shock within the Manteca community, which undoubtedly took pride in its perceived security. The nature of the crime stood out, too. This was a very violent death. She had sustained multiple stab wounds, a constellation of stab wounds that would be consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill. This authoritative statement from Detective Miller delves into forensic and psychological specifics of the murder, confirming its extreme brutality. A very violent death establishes a severity beyond question. The multiple stab wounds, already noted, are now reinforced by the powerful descriptor a constellation of stab wounds, which vividly portrays a multitude of injuries scattered across the body like stars, suggesting a frenzied and sustained attack rather than a single fatal blow. Crucially, the reiteration of overkill solidifies the psychological interpretation. This was not merely about ending a life, but about inflicting maximum pain, expressing profound rage, or engaging in a highly emotionally charged act of destruction. In criminal profiling, overkill strongly points away from a detached, professional killer and towards someone with a deep personal connection or intense emotional volatility, possibly psychotic, acting on intense pent-up feelings. It appeared that the killer had surprised Kathleen as she was on her way out. At the time that we found her car keys were next to her hand. The blunt force trauma indicated that she was beating up, knocked down, while she was fighting to the best of her ability. This meticulously reconstructs the initial moments of the attack, providing critical insight into the confrontation. The observation that the killer had surprised Kathleen as she was on her way out, combined with her car keys next to her hand, corroborates the timeline, placing her at the point of departure as previously established. The evidence of blunt force trauma indicates an initial physical assault that beat ING up and knocked down her, suggesting a violent, perhaps disorienting precursor to the stabbing. The phrase, while she was fighting to the best of her ability, is incredibly significant. It means Kathleen did not passively succumb, but bravely resisted her attacker. This detail offers a powerful glimpse into her courage and resilience in her final moments, adding another layer of heroism to her character, even as it underscores a horrific power imbalance she faced. And once she fell, her attacker had been relentless, enraged. Even, he did not stab her just once. He stayed with her and stabbed her multiple times. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 10 times. This harrowing description emphasizes the savage persistence of the attack, moving from initial assault to sustained, overwhelming violence. The perpetrator's behavior is explicitly characterized as relentless, enraged, even highlighting the extreme emotional state that fueled the brutal act. The dramatic emphasis: he did not stab her just once. He stayed with her and stabbed her multiple times. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 10 times, serves to underscore the sheer number and repetitive nature of the blows. The repeated count culminating in 10 times is a powerful rhetorical device, conveying the full extent of the calculated, devastating, and prolonged assault. This again supports the overkill hypothesis, suggesting an attack driven by a frenzy of intense personal animosity or extreme mental disturbance, far beyond any practical need to incapacitate a victim, truly aiming for annihilation. But who would commit such a horrible crime? I never considered that Katie would have someone who would wish her ill will. This rhetorical question, posed by an incredulous and grieving acquaintance or family member, reflects a profound cognitive dissonance between Kathleen's benevolent character and the viciousness of her murder. The inherent goodness associated with Katie makes it unfathomable that someone who would wish her ill will could exist, let alone commit such an atrocious act. This sentiment is central to the mystery surrounding such a personal crime against a beloved victim. It pushes investigators to look deeper, beyond conventional motives that might apply to a less universally liked individual, raising the chilling possibility of a profoundly disturbed individual driven by an illogical or delusional animus. It forces an internal reckoning on the nature of evil. It didn't appear to be a burglary gone wrong. The houses meet orderly. There was no signs of any forced entry to the house. Valuables throughout the house that hadn't been disturbed. This series of observations by investigators systematically eliminates one of the most common categories of homicide, a robbery that escalates fatally. The orderly state of the house and the decisive lack of signs of any forced entry rule out an opportunistic intruder. Furthermore, the fact that valuables throughout the house that hadn't been disturbed directly refutes the motive of theft. This meticulous enumeration of absence, no forced entry, no disturbed valuables, is powerfully diagnostic in criminal investigation, pointing away from stranger violence or profit-driven crime and strongly towards an assailant known to the victim or an attack driven by deeply personal, non-materialistic motives. It refines the focus toward a very specific and disturbing profile of perpetrator. In fact, other than Kathleen's dead body, the killer had left no trace behind. We never found a bloody knife anywhere, so we believe it was a kitchen knife. The warrants tell us that the knife was a single-edged knife. This collection of details highlights the challenging forensic landscape and specific findings from the crime scene investigation. The chilling statement that, other than Kathleen's dead body, The killer had left no trace behind, underscores a professional execution of the crime in terms of evidence management or a stroke of grim luck for the perpetrator, making the case much harder to solve. The specific absence of a bloody knife anywhere means a murder weapon was removed from the scene, a deliberate act to frustrate the investigation. The question, so we believe it was a kitchen knife, indicates an investigative deduction based on the type of wounds and the accessibility of such a weapon within a domestic setting. The confirmation from the warrants tell us that the knife was a single-edged knife, further refines this belief, providing a more precise description of the murder weapon based on forensic analysis of the wounds. This scarcity of physical evidence directly contrasts with the extreme violence of the crime. But who had wielded it, hoping for some answers, or at least a better sense of the timeline leading up to the murder, the investigators turned to Kathleen's daughter. The lingering question, but who had wielded it, expresses the core investigative imperative to identify the individual behind this violent act. The dual objectives, hoping for some answers and seeking a better sense of the timeline leading up to the murder, reveal the methodical approach of detectives. Understanding the precise sequence of events is paramount for piecing together the narrative of the crime. In the absence of forced entry and the removal of the weapon, the focus naturally shifts to those closest to the victim. Hence, the investigator's crucial decision to turn to Kathleen's daughter, Caitlin, for her invaluable insight and account of the last known hours and dynamics within the home. She represents a crucial initial source of information. I brought Caitlin McGehee back to the police department to interview her at the police station. Caitlin told Detective Miller that she'd been living at home for the past few weeks. This establishes a formal interview process, a cornerstone of criminal investigation. Detective Miller's action of bringing Caitlin back to the police department to interview her ensures a controlled, quiet environment conducive to accurate testimony. Caitlin's revelation that she'd been living at home for the past few weeks is critically important. It means she possessed recent, intimate knowledge of the household's dynamics, routines, and who was present. This provides the police with a vital baseline for understanding the domestic environment just prior to the murder, giving them a detailed insider's perspective of the days and hours leading up to the tragedy. Her presence allows for a detailed chronology to be constructed. My sister was getting married soon, and she had come into town to stay with my parents, do some shopping, find a wedding dress, plan things out. This information from a family member, likely Justin, provides a context for Caitlin's temporary return to the family home. The joyous reason, her impending marriage and associated preparations, such as do ing some shopping, find ing a wedding dress, plan ing things out, highlights a happy occasion that had drawn her back. This details a background for her recent close proximity to her mother and her direct observations of the household environment, making her a crucial witness regarding the days immediately preceding Kathleen's death, emphasizing a period of family unity and celebration, contrasting sharply with the tragedy. Although, according to Caitlin, she was away when her mother was killed, she's been gone for the weekend to a Christian retreat. She left on Friday and was supposed to be coming back on a Sunday, and she made arrangements with her mom to pick her up on Sunday when she got back. This sequence of events, as recounted by Caitlin, details her alibi for the exact time of the murder. Her absence, away when her mother was killed, at a Christian retreat, is accounted for from Friday to Sunday. The key detail is that she made arrangements with her mom to pick her up on Sunday when she got back, confirming the anticipated reunion and explaining Kathleen's pre-planned final chore. This timeline establishes Caitlin as physically absent at the crucial moment, shifting investigative focus away from her for the actual perpetration of the crime, yet confirming her mother's precise last known movements. Caitlin had called the home phone and left a message for her mom saying, "Hey, pick me up at 6 o'clock. But at 6, when Caitlin got back from the retreat, her mother wasn't waiting. This provides a crucial timestamp and confirms Kathleen's non-responsiveness at the appointed time. Caitlin called ING the home phone, and Luaveing a message for her mom saying, "Hey, pick me up at 6 o'clock," establishes a firm expectation. The subsequent discovery that, at 6, when Caitlin got back from the retreat, her mother wasn't waiting, is the first tangible sign of trouble, a deviation from the agreed-upon plan. This indicates that by 6 o'clock on Sunday, Kathleen was either unable or unwilling to meet her daughter, deepening the mystery and the critical window for the crime. When Caitlin tried to call Kathleen didn't answer the house phone. She didn't answer her cell phone. However, after trying to reach Kathleen several times, Caitlin finally did get a call back, only it wasn't her mother. Caitlin's increasingly desperate attempts to contact her mother demonstrate her growing alarm. Repeatedly trying both the house phone and her cell phone confirms a complete lack of contact. With Kathleen, the detail that, after trying to reach Kathleen several times, Caitlin finally did get a call back, initially offers a glimmer of hope that her mother is all right. However, the crushing blow that only it wasn't her mother quickly replaces that hope with renewed dread, setting up the introduction of the first potential significant figure in the unfolding mystery. The failure to reach Kathleen directly solidifies the time she became unresponsive. It was Caitlin's older brother, Dawson. Dawson called and said, "Oh, yeah, I remember Mom said something about you needing to get picked up, and why don't I just pick you up? Because I got some errands to run anyway. Glad she wasn't left stranded." This introduces Dawson McGehee directly into the critical timeline and establishes his initial contact. With Caitlin following Kathleen's non-responsiveness, Dawson's seemingly helpful offer to pick up his sister, couched in a casual tone. "Oh yeah, I remember Mom said something about you needing to get picked up, and why don't I just pick you up because I got some errands to run anyway," appears innocuous on the surface. His concluding remark, "Glad she wasn't left stranded," positions him as a considerate brother stepping in. However, in retrospect, this offer may take on a far more sinister meaning, potentially serving to control the narrative and divert Caitlin from discovering their mother's fate. Prematurely, it's the first moment of an alternative narrative emerging. Caitlin accompanied her brother on his errands, and then the pair stopped off for dinner. They didn't arrive back home until almost 11 o'clock. At night, this provides a detailed account of Caitlin and Dawson's activities throughout Sunday evening. Caitlin accompanied her brother on his errands, suggesting a period of time spent together, establishing an alibi for Dawson during these hours. Their subsequent stop for dinner further extends their time away from the home. The crucial detail that they didn't arrive back home until almost 11 o'clock at night establishes their late return well after the initial agreed-upon pickup time and provides a significant delay before anyone else would have been able to check on Kathleen, giving the perpetrator ample time for actions and concealment. This timeline accounts for Caitlin's whereabouts, but importantly, also Dawson's. By then, her mother had gone to bed. At least, that's what Caitlin's brother said. Dawson told her that their mom was not feeling well. At the time, Caitlin hadn't thought much of it. This pivotal moment highlights Dawson's direct manipulation of information. His assertion that by then her mother had gone to bed offers a plausible, non-alarming explanation for Kathleen's absence and unresponsiveness, deflecting any immediate suspicion. The qualifier, at least, that's what Caitlin's brother said, subtly hints at the unreliable nature of this statement, placing it in doubt retrospectively. Dawson's explanation that their mom was not feeling well provides a seemingly legitimate reason for her early slumber. Critically, at the time, Caitlin hadn't thought much of it, reveals her trust in her brother, underscoring how easily she accepted his narrative, which effectively served to delay the discovery of the crime and protect Dawson from immediate scrutiny. This is the moment the web of deceit begins to form. She simply just goes to bed herself in her bedroom, The next morning, when her mother didn't stir, Caitlin figured that her mother was still sleeping in, something her brother later confirmed. This continues the pattern of deferred discovery. Caitlin's simple act of going to bed herself in her bedroom indicates that Dawson's explanation was sufficient to alleviate her immediate anxieties, allowing the tragedy to remain hidden overnight. Her thoughts, the next morning, when her mother didn't stir, Caitlin figured that her mother was still sleeping in, again demonstrate her continued trust and rationalization of the situation within the framework of her mother's supposed illness. The fact that this was something her brother later confirmed illustrates Dawson's continued efforts to control the narrative and perpetuate the illusion of Kathleen's natural slumber, further buying himself crucial time while the crime lay hidden. At 6:30, he sends her a text saying, "Hey, I talked to Mom earlier this morning. She's not feeling well. She's going to sleep the rest of the afternoon." This precise timestamp and method of communication, at 6:30, he sends her a text, are incredibly important pieces of evidence. The text itself, "Hey, I talked to Mom earlier this morning. She's not feeling well. She's going to sleep the rest of the afternoon," is a direct, conscious fabrication designed to solidify the false narrative of Kathleen's ill health and prolonged sleep. This text message becomes a damning piece of circumstantial evidence, demonstrating Dawson's premeditated deceit and his active role in obscuring the truth, rather than being merely an unwitting bystander. It provides a tangible record of his consciousness of guilt, an intent to mislead and manipulate his sister to maintain the cover-up while the crime scene remained concealed. According to Caitlin, she and Dawson had spent the morning out. Dawson said that Kathleen had asked Dawson to drive Caitlin to do some errands, such as closing her bank account. This further details the actions taken by Dawson to maintain control and delay discovery. Caitlin's account that she and Dawson had spent the morning out extends Dawson's alibi and prevents Caitlin from independently checking on their mother. Dawson's explanation that Kathleen had asked Dawson to drive Caitlin to do some errands such as closing her bank account is another fabricated narrative designed to explain their continued absence from the house. This highly specific instruction, supposedly from their mother, again shows Dawson's manipulative construction of a believable reason for their activities, painting himself as helpful and obedient, when in reality he was maintaining the crime scene and preventing its early detection. This elaborate web of lies illustrates a calculated mind at work, meticulously constructing an alibi and delaying the inevitable discovery. Then, she met a friend for lunch. When she got home, she didn't see Dawson, and then she went to go check on her mom. This completes Caitlin's day-long movements, finally bringing her back to the point of discovery. After spending the morning with Dawson on fabricated errands, Caitlin then met a friend for lunch, accounting for her time independently. The crucial moment arrives when she got home and didn't see Dawson, signifying his absence and leaving her alone in the house. This lack of his presence, combined with a delayed sense of concern from the earlier false narratives, finally prompts her to go check on her mom, leading directly to the horrifying discovery she had postponed for over a day, unknowingly manipulated by her brother's deceptions. Caitlin had called 911, and then her brother, Justin, who'd rushed right over. When I got there and I saw police lights and ambulance lines flashing. This vividly brings us back to the immediate aftermath of Caitlin's discovery. Her immediate call to 911 signifies a direct confirmation of a dire emergency, overriding any remaining doubts. The subsequent call to her brother, Justin, who'd rushed right over, speaks to the immediate family distress and the rush to comprehend the unfolding tragedy. Justin's eyewitness account. When I got there and I saw police lights and ambulance lines flashing, confirms the full-scale emergency response, painting a chaotic scene of official presence that validates Caitlin's fears and marks the tragic end of Kathleen's life within the family's innocent perception. This is a culmination of her dreadful, prolonged delay in uncovering the truth. Caitlin had also tried calling Dawson. She was actually outside with law enforcement trying to call him to let him know that Dawson was not answering his phone. Caitlin was not able to get in touch with him. This detail reveals Caitlin's attempt to contact Dawson, underscoring her natural instinct to inform her immediate family of the unfolding tragedy. Her desperate actions, even outside with law enforcement trying to call him to let him know, demonstrates her trust and her expectation of a supportive response from her brother. However, the critical failure, Dawson was not answering his phone. Caitlin was not able to get in touch with him. Immediately raises a red flag. His unresponsiveness, given the gravity of the situation, strongly suggests either intentional avoidance or flight response, suddenly making him the central figure of suspicion. His absence at such a critical moment transforms from casual omission to incriminating behavior, setting the police's sights on him. Did that mean he wasn't aware of the horror that awaited behind his mother's locked door? Where was he at when this apparently happened? We knew that she had been deceased for at least a few hours. Rigor mortis has set in. These are the immediate, probing questions that arise for investigators concerning Dawson's suspicious absence. The first query: did that mean he wasn't aware of the horror that awaited behind his mother's locked door? Questions his claimed ignorance and lack of contact. The direct question, where was he at when this apparently happened, immediately focuses the investigation on his whereabouts and potential involvement. The forensic observation: we knew that she had been deceased for at least a few hours. Rigor mortis has set in, provides a crucial time of death estimate. Rigor mortis, the stiffening of muscles after death, is a reliable indicator that places the time of Kathleen's demise significantly before the discovery, directly conflicting with Dawson's claims of the mother merely sleeping in. This scientific fact casts a pall of extreme suspicion over his entire narrative. Or had she been dead even longer? Kathleen's phone records indicated that her last call had been made on Sunday afternoon to Dawson's older brother, Colin, while she was working in the kitchen. This question about an extended time of death probes deeper into the window of the crime. The subsequent piece of evidence: Kathleen's phone records indicated that her last call had been made on Sunday afternoon to Dawson's older brother, Colin, provides concrete, objective data. The time and recipient of the call, coupled with her activity while she was working in the kitchen, creates an irrefutable timeline of her last known living moments where she was definitively alive and engaging in normal activity. This is critical for narrowing down the precise window during which the murder must have occurred, offering a stark contrast to Dawson's prolonged obfuscation. She talked to her son on the phone right around 4 o'clock, so we know that she's alive and well at 4 o'clock. We know she's not answered her phone at 5 o'clock, and no one other than Dawson can say that they saw her or spoke to her after that time.